Welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the matchup of the week. It came down to quite a few options. I'll reveal that in just a second. I do want to add one continuation on the WWD from last night. I just thought it was worth mentioning to everyone watching. Deshaun Watson might actually be facing a multiple game suspension for everything that happened at the ending of the game. I didn't even mention it in the video. I didn't think it would matter. But basically, he shoved a ref to the side, pretty much, which is a big no-no in football. You cannot touch the refs. He didn't get ejected from the game or anything, which is why I didn't think it was a big deal. But there are a lot of talks about it that he might get suspended for a few games. I still don't think he will, but it is worth mentioning. I thought I should just talk about that real quick. And let's start talking about the matchup of the week. Now let's do a quick recap of week one. The matchup of the week was myself and Pussy. Pussy ended up winning that one. Week two, we had Rictatorship against Big Yawners. Rictatorship came out on top and beat Big Yawners in a very close, damn good matchup for that week. And as you'll see with the rankings, Big Yawners is currently ranked number 6 with Rictatorship at number 7. Myself, I'm ranked 4th with Pussy ranked 3rd. I think these have been pretty good picks so far for games of the week. This week it actually came down to 3 different matchups. No, it's definitely not MILF and Toxic. They both suck. Steeler Girl and Karen's husband, they're both dealing with a lot of stupid injuries right now, but maybe it'll be a good game for the lower scores. Both have potential once players start being more healthy and their teams get more rounded out. Um, it's not going to be myself and J-Bay because J-Bay's going to. I'm barely going to win the game. I'm going to have to rely on paying the refs off, to be honest. His team's just built different. I'm understanding looking at his team why Tack and everybody else had to pay him off. Overall, it came down to Pussy Big Yawners, Scrambled Wiggle Waggled, and Rictatorship and Booty and PMC. I'm going to talk about why it's not two of those options that I just mentioned, just because I think it would go in detail because there's these three all have a good argument for being matchup of the week. It's not going to be Booty and PMC. Here's why: the Eagles have a very tough defensive matchup against the Buccaneers here. Here's the thing: Booty Basher is almost entirely reliant. Well, not entirely, but he has a shit ton of Eagles players starting on this offense that are going to be playing all against a Tampa Bay's defense. Now, don't get me wrong, the Eagles' defense is one of the best, if not the best offense in the league. The Eagles' offense is one of the best in the league. The defense is pretty good too. But anyway, the offense is definitely one of the best in the league. Don't get me wrong, but they are playing against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are one of the better defenses in the entire league. So this is going to be iffy. I think best case scenario, some of your guys go green, and while some of them are definitely going to get buried in the red. But overall, having that many players probably isn't going to pan out for you. On top of that, you have Jalen Hurts, who's going against Devontae Smith on PMC. So overall, this is just a really bad matchup for Booty. It's not looking good. I think it's going to take a big upset for Booty to actually win this game. San Fran's playing against a weak-looking Giants offense. So overall, I don't think it's going to be as close of a game or that much of a shootout as the projections are saying. I actually think PMC is going to take the win here, but we'll have to wait and see. It's not going to be Pussy and Big Yawners. I was actually very much thinking it was going to be Pussy and Big Yawners going into making this video, and then I thought about it. It looks like it's going to be a shootout on paper, and it very well might be. However, there's a lot of things that are starting to work against Big Yawners here, in the same way that there was a lot working against Booty Basher. Jerome Ford, I hyped him up to hell and back last night. However, they just signed Kareem Hunt. That was fast. Jerome Ford might not actually even be startable. We'll have to wait and see. I think he'll still at least put up points. But Kareem Hunt, I think, is going to get the majority of the workload. Not only is he used to the offense, he's been there for years. They just specifically went out of their way to drop $4 million in salary cap on him. I think they're going to use Kareem Hunt as their main guy. I could be wrong, but only time can tell. With Amari Cooper, if Deshaun Watson, like I just mentioned earlier, were to be suspended for this upcoming week, Amari Cooper suddenly isn't that great anymore. Then you might be missing Joe Burrow. You might be missing Aaron Jones. So overall, big yawners could be taking a lot of hits this week. And in a similar situation, I think to PMC and Booty Basher, I think Pussy's in a pretty good scenario for this week going into it. So overall, I'm a bit concerned if I'm PMC Wagner, at least for this week. Or not PMC, if I'm big yawners, at least for this week. Which means, you guessed it, the matchup of the week comes down to Rictatorship and a 2x4. Now, this 2x4, some may say, now it's a 2x4. Surely Rictatorship has it in the bag. No, unfortunately, this 2x4 has a defense that's correct. We'll get into depth about it, but jokes aside, it scrambled and wiggle waggled in Rictatorship. At the start of the season, whenever I was making my rankings, I had Rictatorship ranked at 9th and Scrambled and Wiggle Waggled ranked at 7th at quarterback. Now, Rictatorship and Scrambled have held the same quarterback since the beginning of the year, where Rictatorship has Dak Prescott as his QB1, Scrambled has Justin Fields. Dak Prescott, even though he was disappointing week 1 from a fantasy point of view, we all know it wasn't really his fault. It was just because of that defense doing so good that the offense really didn't need to do that much. But overall, then he also has CD, or we're not going to talk about him yet, but then also overall, he's a very good quarterback option. Scrambled and Wiggle Waggled has Justin Fields, who has been looking atrocious out there. Yeah, as a Bears fan, he really hasn't been looking good. The O-line hasn't been looking good. The receivers have actually been looking solid, but that's about where the upside ends. However, there is one thing to mention, and I had Fields last year in fantasy. Throughout the first few weeks, he was horrible. He did the exact same thing he's doing right now, where he's doing just dog shit in games. I guess he's still putting up okay numbers in fantasy, but he was doing the same thing where he was having dog shit games. And then once we got to about week 3 or 4 is when he blew up and did really good in fantasy last year. I'm not saying history's going to repeat itself. I'm just saying it might be look at the bright side kind of scenario. Maybe it happens starting this week. Who knows? And then Jordan Love, you also have as your quarterback too for Dictatorship. He has been doing way better than I expected him to do. He might be getting Christian Watson to return, which would make him even better. Jordan Love, there's definitely a lot of upside here that I don't think many of us were expecting at the beginning of the season. I definitely wasn't. But overall, that's a very good addition to his team that he's had. While Scrambled and Wiggle Waggled has Deshaun Watson, who, if he doesn't get hit with a fine or suspension or anything like that, should go out there and have a way better week than he's been having. I've been talking about it left and right, where the Browns are going to be a lot more reliant on passing down running backs and passing the ball a lot more. So overall, it's very iffy. Like I said, he could get suspended. And on that case, I would kind of regret not putting Big Yawners and Pussy at the matchup of the week. But if Watson were to stay healthy here, or not stay healthy, stay non-suspended, that's going to be the good matchup for quarterbacks at least. It's nothing like too crazy, but 9th and 7th with Rictatorship and with both of these teams looking better than they were looking at the start of the season with their quarterback room overall. Then we go into running backs, where we got Rachaad White and Kenneth Walker. White has been he looked pretty bad week 1, but week 2 he did really good. And then Kenneth Walker has actually been doing pretty damn good. So I think he did okay week 1, week 2 he did pretty good. But he has been touchdown reliant, which is a little concerning. So overall, I'd keep an eye on that. While Scrambled and Wiggle Waggle just has the entire Washington running back depth chart. So anyway, Brian Robinson, yeah, he's been looking phenomenal. 13.6, 28.9, absolute steal there. Antonio Gibson has been looking less phenomenal with 0.3 and 8.3. He has the fact that he had some big blow-up plays with his receiving game, which could be some upside, meaning he might earn some of those reception downs back, but that still overall isn't helping you because you have Brian Robinson, the only guy who would be taking them. Overall, this is a bit different because at the beginning of the year, Rictatorship actually had James Conner and A.J. Dillon and Raheem Mostert. He actually just lost all 3 of them. So he did get the addition of Kenneth Walker. He does have the addition of Joshua Kelly as well, who is going to be useless this week unless Austin Ekeler were to be out again. If that were the case, I would give Joshua Kelly another shot at starting, just because of how much upside there is alone. He might have had a bad week last week, but he was playing against one of the better run defensive teams in the league. So there's that. This week he should be playing against a lot more friendly matchup with the Vikings, who just lost their middle linebacker over the offseason, and Eric Kendricks. Overall, I think Rick Tatership's running backs downgraded a little bit. Unless Kelly plays, then he's doing pretty good. He also has Elliott, but I don't really think there's much there worth mentioning. I've given Elliott quite a few chances, but I don't really think he's going to do too much to change things. And then Scrambled and Wiggle Waggled, I believe that's pretty much all they did with their running back room, was gain Antonio Gibson. Okay, they also lost Cam Akers, but that's not really too much of a hit. He's pretty much in the same situation as Antonio Gibson. But he also has A.J. Dillon, who, again, is going to be in the same exact scenario as Joshua Kelly. It's actually kind of funny that they're lined up against each other, where, say, Aaron Jones were to miss another week, I'd give him another shot and let him go back in there and maybe score more points than he did last week, because both of these guys had the same thing where both of their starters were out. They went in and actually ended up being complete duds. Now, you can call me crazy, you can call me insane, definition of insanity right here, but I would try them both again if their starters were out, which could be very good with that upside. Like I said, I think it's going to be more often than not they'll hit the upside. I think those were kind of fluke weeks where they're playing good defenses. Overall, well, the Falcons' defense isn't good, but the Packers were more using the air game because the Falcons' pass defense was a bit struggling. But overall, I think it'll have better weeks. So it's a pretty interesting matchup for the quarterbacks and running backs going into it. Very even, as you'll see. Wide receivers, I had Rick Tatership ranked at. Oh, by the way, I haven't been saying the rankings for these, have I? For running backs, I had Rick Tatership at the beginning of the season ranked 5th, and then Scrambled ranked 12th. And then for receivers, I had Rick Tatership ranked 8th, while Scrambled and Wiggle Waggled was ranked 12th again. Rick Tatership held the same wide receivers, nothing really changed there. While Scrambled and Wiggle Waggled actually lost A.J. Brown, gained Mike Williams, lost Darnell Mooney, gained Jaden Reed. So we'll break this down real quick. Mike Williams is a boomer bust player. Well, mostly he's going to do at least okay. Usually his injuries are the thing that holds him back. Overall, he's not nearly as good as I'd say A.J. Brown would be in terms of fantasy. But as you'll see with like weeks like last week, for example, he can always have those weeks where he puts up like 16, 20 some points, sometimes more. But overall, I'd rather have A.J. Brown. You also gain Jaden Reed, who, here's another interesting thing, where if Rick Tatership's Christian Watson were to go down or were to be hurt for a third week in a row, Jaden Reed is probably a must start. And I'll talk about it in the recommended start bench and all that stuff video tomorrow, where if Christian Watson were to actually be out for the Packers game, I would start Jaden Reed and put A.J. Dillon at your running back spot, and then I would probably bench Antonio Gibson, at least for this week, just because of that high upside you have, where you're taking care of the passing game if they end up passing a lot. Rick Tatership's getting fucked over, and on top of that, you're going to have the running game in case they rely on those runs. So overall, you'll get the upside out of it. And then we'll start talking about these receivers as well, off of both teams other than the additions that were made. Okay, so obviously CeeDee Lamb for Rick Tatership is going to be phenomenal with the Cowboys playing against the Cardinals' shitty defense, and this is kind of why I picked this matchup too. Where Scrambled and Wiggle Waggled's secret weapon, the Dallas defense, that's just been bullying everybody, number 1 in the fucking league in terms of points. Rick Tatership is actually a direct counter to that, because let's say Dallas's defense can do really good against Arizona's offense. The same can be said with this offense against Arizona's defense, who's missing their only good player, which was Budda Baker. So this whole defense is dog shit. There is the scenario, kind of like what you saw with week 1, where the Giants are winning by or the Cowboys are winning by so much that they just stop really doing much on offense with these two, and the defense just keeps doing good. But scenarios like that, even when it's a juggernaut against a shit team, are still really rare. But overall, Rictatorship is probably going to be mass producing points out of those two in the same way that Scrambled's going to be doing that with the defenses. Um, but we'll talk about the defenses and all that later. I just wanted to throw that in there. But overall, I think CeeDee Lamb's going to have a huge week. Drake London's going against the Lions. These are two very weak pass defense teams. Overall, I think Drake London's going to have a pretty good day because I think the Falcons are going to be passing a lot. It's just a matter of if they can find him because, Ritter's dog shit. And then you also have Tyler Lockett over on the side of Scrambled and Wiggle Waggled. He's going to be in a tough matchup against going into his second year now, J.C. Horn. J.C. Horn's been a really good corner, one of the best coverage corners in the league. And I think he's going to be going up against Tyler Lockett. There's a chance he goes against Metcalf, but he's been taking on the speedsters so far this year, at least. So Michael Thomas actually did good against him, but like I said, we'll have to just see how he does this year, or does against Tyler Lockett here. And then in terms of flex, obviously Christian Watson. I think Christian Watson will do not phenomenal, but he'll do pretty damn good if he actually plays. Raheem Shaheed, the guy I called a terrorist in the receiver rankings video, has actually been doing pretty solid, as we talked about in WWD last night, where he's getting a few catches for a lot of yards. He's getting good returns. So overall, it's actually a pretty good flex to have, but I do think he does have a very low floor that he could just 1 week randomly decide to get 0 points, but he definitely does have a good upside, though. Let's get into tight end. I had Rictatorship ranked at number 2 when it came to tight ends whenever I was ranking all the videos, or ranking all the positions. Who has TJ Hawkinson, who's done pretty good this year. He had an okay to good week 1, 11.5 points. Week 2, he did very good, 25.6 points overall, which is pretty good. And then Scrambled and Wiggle Waggled was ranked 10th. And they're using Tyler Higbee, who really has not looked good. I thought originally going into the season Tyler Higbee would be the main option to throw the ball to overall, but that seems to be going to Tutu Atwell and Puka Naku. I don't even know how to pronounce that guy's name, to be honest. Puka Nakuka or something like that. Nakua. Puka Nakua, I think, is the way you say it. So Higbee really hasn't looked that great, and Scramble did lose their backup tight end, Sam Laporta, who actually is starting to look better as the weeks go on. You also have Okonkwo on the bench, but I wouldn't trust that. He had a horrible week 1, bad week 2, And I also forgot to mention this now that I'm looking at the bench with Algier. Rictatorship is currently in a trade where he might lose Algier. We'll talk about that later with the D-line. I just wanted to mention that he might actually be losing Algier. And then Rictatorship also has Marquise Brown, who's going against a crazy Dallas defense, so he's not really going to be worth mentioning too much. There's a reason I didn't mention the bench a lot, but I'll go over it anyway. And then Treylon Burks is iffy. He's boom or bust, I think. I think he'll go back down to earth this week with DeAndre Hopkins playing hopefully healthier with more rest this week. I think it'll be more of a bigger DeAndre Hopkins week than Treylon Burks week. And other than that, there really isn't too much to mention on the bench. Then we go look at kickers. I actually had Rictatorship ranked at 8th, while Scrambled was ranked at 9th. Now Evan McPherson, with Joe Burrow playing like dog shit, is naturally also being dog shit because the Bengals are not scoring points. Now, the Bengals did score 3 touchdowns last week, which is an improvement, but touchdowns aren't really helping. You want field goals if you're using a guy like this, or so many touchdowns that you won't need field goals, which the Bengals are kind of in the worst spot right now until Joe Burrow pulls his head out of his ass. So overall, he's not looking good. Greg Joseph is kind of the same situation with these Vikings, where they're scoring a touchdown on pretty much every play or on every drive, or they're causing a turnover to happen. So he's just really not getting many opportunities for these field goals. Then we had the team defenses, this is a number 1 versus number 2 battle right here. In terms of the rankings, Rick Tatership was ranked 2, Evan was ranked number 1. Now, Philadelphia is going against Tampa Bay, whose offense has actually looked decent behind Baker Mayfield. I think a bit better than we were all expecting. They do have pretty damn good receivers, and they do have Rachaad White, which I'm not a fan of you having players playing against your own defense. That usually won't work out for both of them. Odds are at least one will go red. Overall, I think Scrambled in terms of the defense definitely has a huge upper hand here with Dallas against Arizona, because Arizona is just horrible. Then we look at DBs, where Rick Tatership was ranked 3rd. And since then, he's had the addition of Javon Holland, who actually I would argue won him his game last week. 27-21. Dude has been ridiculous, getting a combined total of 25 tackles if you combine the assists and solo between the first 2 weeks. Dude is doing insane work right now. But he did lose Jalen Thompson, who we'll talk about in the free agency video tomorrow, because now that Buda Baker's gone, he might have a lot of upside, and we'll talk about him tomorrow for sure. But overall, this defensive back room is just amazing. Plus, you have Justin Simmons and Jalen Pitre. I think Pitre, if he can be healthy and actually play this week, could be one of the best upsided defensive backs in the league. Simmons has been pretty good for you so far. He had 7 week 1, which is meh, and then 17 week 2. Like I said, at the beginning of the season, he's usually kind of average to boom game. He usually won't do that bad for you. While Scrambled and Wiggle Waggled finished 10th, and he kept his same safeties. He's had Jonathan Owens, who's played like dog shit because he's not the full safety there. I warned Scrambled of that in week 1. I would honestly recommend trying to pick someone up off of free agency if I was Scrambled here. And then Tracy Walker, I don't even think is starting. I think that one tackle he had was on accident. I think he might have tripped the water boy or something. I don't know. But I do not listen to the projections. I would go find yourself 2 new DBs ASAP if I was Scrambled and Wiggle Waggled. And you can look at the video tomorrow to find out which ones I'd recommend. Looking at the D-line, we have Rick Tatership, who is ranked at 9th when I made the rankings. He has Quinnen Williams coming in, who is amazing. He's done pretty good throughout the first 2 weeks, 13-17 last year he had 203 points. Very good. He is going up against a pretty good Patriots offensive line, though, which is a bit iffy, but overall he's a much better improvement over Dexter Lawrence in terms of fantasy, which, by the way, Rick Tatership might be cutting Dexter Lawrence as part of this trade, I believe. And then, speaking of this trade, he might gain the addition of Kwity Paye from the Colts, who's been one of the highest scoring defensive linemen in the year so far throughout the first 2 weeks. He was one of the highest scoring whenever he could stay healthy too. The problem is he has a huge injury history. But if he can stay healthy, yeah, this D-line might take a big improvement if this trade gets accepted. And then there's DeMarcus Lawrence, who's I don't want to say he's done good, because he has been pretty sack reliant, or pretty tackle for loss / sack reliant, which a lot of defensive linemen are, but you would ideally want guys who can at least make a few tackles happen in case they don't get that sack, which is something that I like a guy like Quinnen Williams for, who's getting him a minimum of like 5 per week usually, even though he's a defensive tackle. Scrambled and Wiggle Waggled whenever he was ranked earlier this season, was ranked 8th. He has Greg Rousseau, who's been a bit of a disappointment, but to be fair, he has played up against a really good offensive line from the Jets. And the Raiders, yeah, that was a bit of a stinker, to be honest, but maybe he does better as the weeks go on. But 9 points is still okay. He did get the addition of Javon Hargrave after Big Giannis dropped him, which I think is a bit questionable, but overall, it is kind of hard to trust Javon Hargrave. Just as a consistent guy overall, he's like the definition of boom or bust when it comes to defensive linemen in fantasy. He is going up against the Giants' offensive line, which isn't great. However, Daniel Jones is a scrambler, which usually doesn't fare well for defensive tackles, but who knows, that O-line does suck, so that kind of counters that out. And then you do have Daron Payne, who's kind of facing the same situation where he's playing against a not elite O-line, but he's playing against a scrambler, which will probably make it harder to get sacks. But Daron Payne has done not phenomenal, but very good. One of the higher scoring defensive linemen in the league so far. So that's something worth mentioning. I'm gonna think about it. I might consider making him one of the starter bench options in tomorrow's video. I'll have to think about it. It's an interesting scenario you got there. And then let's look at the linebackers. We got Dictatorship, who was ranked 5th when I was making the videos, and since I made the videos, he gained Demario Davis and might be gaining Alex Singleton if this trade goes through with Pussy. And he lost Leighton Vander Esch and Eric Kendricks. I think Demario Davis kind of cancels out Eric Kendricks. I think they're both pretty consistent, both pretty good with upside. Vander Esch, I've been telling you from the start, is just not good in fantasy because of how many playmakers that Dallas defense has. If you do get Alex Singleton, I don't think he's really anything that special. I'm really not a fan of him just because I think, as we'll talk about in like literally 10 seconds here, Josey Jewell will be taking most of the tackles on that team. He's kind of the second guy, kind of like I was talking to PMC Wagner about. He's pretty much the Shaquille Leonard of that defense compared to Zaire Franklin as the main guy. But overall, he's not going to be doing that great, I don't think. I think he was just kind of like a plea for Pussy to get a free bench spot. But overall, yeah, I'm not a fan of him. But you do have Bobby Wagner, who's done about as good as you can ever ask a linebacker to do. 29-17, he's done very good. You have Lavonte David, who shit himself against the Bears. To be fair, he did go into concussion protocol and was out for a lot of the game, but if he comes back, I think he'll start to do better again. So overall, I think he's going to be solid. And overall, you don't have any more linebackers anymore, so you might actually have downgraded a little bit, but, well, it depends on if you get Singleton, to be honest, because you're not going to be losing anybody in terms of linebackers from that trade. Scrambled and Wiggle Waggled has, in terms of his linebackers, since the beginning of the season started, he gained Josey Jewell, who's that guy that's going to be probably cucking Alex Singleton all game or all week with the Broncos, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, Josey Jewell is just very good, and I would say, since these two linebackers are pretty much going to be potentially going at it in terms of fantasy, I would say a good 8 times out of 10, Josey Jewell's going to outscore Alex Singleton, probably more than that. That's just a rough estimate. You got Quay Walker, who is another definition of boom or bust. He's done very good throughout the first 2 weeks, I'll give you that. I don't know where the hell those 17 total tackles came from, because if you see week 1, he had 4, and I actually warned you about that in the start bench video. But you know what? I was wrong. He decided to just make it a point. He said, listen, Justin, fuck you. I'm going to take these 19 tackles and shove them up your ass. And then I took them up my ass without the lube, and it kind of hurts. But anyway, yeah, he really did very good, and he keeps proving me wrong, but we'll see if he can keep it up in this week. Then you have Jack Campbell, who I was right about, but he is starting to get more snaps, where he's not doing much because he's a rookie, but he is starting to get more snaps out there, so I guess you can kind of make an argument for starting him now. But overall, he's not like getting a full workload like some of these other guys are. You lost Shaq Thompson, but that's not too big of a loss. You still have Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who's boomer bust because he's like a Frankie Louvu type guy with toxic, where he will have those weeks where he does pretty good, and then he'll have those weeks where he just stinks it up like week 1. And then you also have Pete Werner, who's been a bit of a disappointment this year. He's kind of getting screwed over with these tackle assists. He's getting a lot of plays where he's like there ready to make the tackle, but someone else gets credited the tackle. So he's overall getting a bit screwed over, but maybe he starts getting more points as the season goes on. But overall, this is a good division matchup. I think my prediction says that Dictatorship's going to win, especially if Scrambled and Wiggle Waggle were to keep the current lineup they have, but there's a lot of things that can change here, such as like Austin Eckler playing or not, Aaron Jones playing or not, Deshaun Watson playing or not. There's a lot of factors here. For now, my prediction is Rick Tatership takes the win. But if the scenario, like say another one, Christian Watson goes down, like I said, then I think if Scrambled starts Jaden Reed, yeah, all of a sudden this becomes a completely different ball game. But either way, I think it's going to be close. I think it'll be a damn good one, and it's for a division win. So I think keep an eye. I say keep an eye on Dictatorship and Scrambled and Wiggle Waggle. Good luck, fellas. This is looking like a very good matchup. I'm going to release that free agency / start bench video tonight, and I'll see you then.